Thanks for having me. I feel really proud to be here. I work with human rights and democracy activists around the world. I'm on a mission to apply brain science to make people care about those things. My father would be really happy to see me here, or maybe a bit jealous. Even back in the 70s, he was writing books as a professor of European studies saying the European Parliament should have more power, more budget. He would have loved the panel that was just before the break. I want to do something that he would never do, that maybe has never been done in this room. I want to share some different tools, and I want to start by sharing a psychological tool for supporting democracy. It's called a physiological sigh. Try this out with me. What we're going to do is we're going to take 3 deep breaths in together, and then we're all going to make a sigh. And I'm going to explain the science behind this. So do this with me. Don't make me look like too much of a fool. Let's start now. So what we just did is called a physiological sigh. We activated our vagus nerve, which takes us out of a fear-based, reactive, impulsive state in which if someone tells us we're wrong, morally wrong, we're using the wrong facts, we get defensive and we reject that information. We even double down on the fake news. Whereas neuroscientists and psychologists say if we can use a tool like this, activate our vagus nerve and enter a more reflective, open-minded state, we're more likely to be open to changing our minds, understand the perspective of people who are different from us. I think these are tools we quite need in democracy. And if the latest research about our neurobiology as human beings shows that tools like this make us work better together, why doesn't every single democratic institution in the world start with this strange hippie experiment that I just asked you all to do? There are a huge swathe of tools, social and emotional infrastructure that we could be building to support democracy, and I can guarantee you that the forces of autocracy, they are using this neuroscience to spread fear. And so we need to be as good as they are at spreading the things that underpin democracy, which, among others, are hope. So that's why I name my approach hope-based communication. But what is also the purpose of my approach is that narrative is work we all have to do. So practically what I want to do next is just share practical tools around narrative that all of you can use in the shape of 3 questions and 3 tools. The title of our panel uses a metaphor. And metaphors drive our action. The words we use subconsciously drive our action. And the metaphor of a battle reinforces a false idea that the way we change minds is with arguments and debates. And there's a great book called Don't Talk About Politics by a neuroscientist called Sarah Stein-Librano. And she provides the evidence that telling someone they're wrong, providing all the facts, arguing it out with them, does not change minds. What drives our political positions is identity, belief, belonging. And so the idea that we will fight narratives is very false, because actually what we fight, we feed. George Lakoff in this book, don't think of an elephant, right? Don't think of an elephant, because as soon as you bring an idea to mind, even to reject it, you reinforce it. What you fight, you feed. When we engage with an fake or anti-democratic narrative, we're actually reinforcing it. And so the only way to avoid reinforcing harmful ideas or narratives or fake news is to actually think, what is the narrative we want? What is the thinking about democracy that we want there to be out there? And I think the point Richard made is really important, that we also, when we talk about democracy under threat, we risk reinforcing that narrative at the expense of showing how democracy is working right now. So actually the metaphor we need to use is about nature and growing. We grow our own narrative. And so the 3 questions we can ask ourselves are, what would it look like? What is our vision? What would it look like if we had more democracy? What would life look like? And I do this work with activists, and it's really amazing. All over the world, a very similar image comes up, which is actually just one of community. And that's interesting because Hannah Arendt said that the foundation of totalitarianism is loneliness. So we come back again to the need for that social infrastructure for democracy. Maybe it's about physical infrastructure like squares and parks, but it's also about connection to each other. I'm surprised no one's mentioned Jürgen Habermas since he died last week, but he talked about the public sphere. For him, the picture was cafes, for example. So we have to put that picture in the mind of our audience because human beings have predictive brains. We imagine and support ideas based on things we've already seen and heard. So if you have an idea, if we just say the word democracy and you have an idea of what that means, people can't imagine it unless you put that picture in people's minds. And we often leave it unsaid. Which brings us to the second question we have to ask ourselves is, what do you say when the facts aren't enough? What is the moral belief that underpins democracy? So the point is, when you say democracy, what do you mean? I think a lot of people here might mean a different thing. Some people might think voting. Some people might think living together in a society where we actually learn to get along and overcome our differences. And so again, we can't just say the word democracy. It's a contested concept that means different things to different people. So we have to do work to articulate the underlying belief. For example, Martha Nussbaum has written a book called Monarchy of Fear, where she talks about the underlying mindset that underpins authoritarianism, or monarchy is the belief that survival of the fittest, we live in a dangerous world, we're all individuals, and we need a strong leader to keep us safe from harm. Whereas democracy depends on hope, that we trust in our fellow citizens and we share power with them. The way we articulate those is all of us actually have to look inside us and just ask ourselves the questions, what does democracy mean to me? And we actually have to say those things, so this vocabulary. And we're not doing that work. The way ideas and concepts live in our brain is different ideas wired together. So when we say democracy is not a Western concept, we are fusing those two ideas in the brain of our audience, reinforcing the idea that democracy is a Western concept. So what we have to do is say, what is democracy? And we have to tell that story. And the last question we have to ask ourselves is, what does it look like for people to do democracy? So what is the picture you want people to get in their heads when they hear the word democracy? Is it people just going to a ballot box and casting a vote? Or is it something else? And so the point is, experience and action reinforce support. If you want people to be pro-democracy, there has to be some form of action they can take that will reinforce that support. You have to be able to bring it to life. So we talked about cafes, for example. What is that 21st century version of that? If people cannot do it and practice it themselves, then they cannot support it. And I would sharing one note of hope. So I think the neuroscience explains a lot to us of authoritarianism, right? It's so easy to use fear to turn us against each other, undermine democracy. But it also shows us that human beings are fundamentally wired for democracy. There's a thing called brain plasticity. We are constantly changing each other's attitudes, behavior, and culture. So all of us can make a decision to share the stories that show democracy working right now, because the stories we tell today shape the actual social reality in the world. The stories we tell today shape our actions tomorrow.